Cross-border hiring has been a bone of contention for so many people in the taxi trade. Some people love it. Yeah, cross-border hiring is really, really good. It means that I can work really wherever I want to work. I can work with Uber, work with a base company and Uber. I can change areas where I want to work. It gives you so much freedom. And also what it does, it really can maximize your earnings. And then there are other people who are really 100% against cross-border hiring. Cross-border hiring, big no. I'm a local driver and I work in my local area, and everyone on my system has to be badged to my local area because we keep it local. Local drivers for local people. So what is it and why did it come about? Well, we'll find out that as the video goes on. But first, we go back to a time in the taxi industry before smartphones, before Uber and before PDA or data heads. We went back to see how the job was back in time before cross-border hiring was even thought about. Way back in time into the 90s. Now back in time, to have a private hire license, you needed to be licensed, your vehicle and your badge to an operator, and the operator worked in your local area. So basically my license is Sefton and my operator was Delta in Sefton, and everybody on my base company and every base company back then were all badged exactly the same. But what was it like back in the 90s?
Vauxhall Road, Netherfield Road, Choice of the Brow, anyone town, anyone town, Vauxhall Road, Netherfield Road, Anfield, Kirby, West Derby, Anfield, Kirby, West Derby, Handy 4, Mobile 2, Anfield, Kirby, West Derby, West Derby, Heighton Moss, Heighton the Moss, Heighton the Moss, Heighton the Moss, Heighton the Moss, West Derby, Netherfield Road, Heighton the Moss,
Come on,
town, loads in town now, loads in town, Handy 4, Mobile 2, town, loads in town, Handy 4, Mobile 2, town, 34, 16, 71, 18,
3-0.
3-1. Bombed out church, Karen. 3-2.
3-0.
3-2.
3-0.
3-2. Breaking up. You're breaking up.
Jesus, I can't get in.
Up. Move your aerial a bit there, lad. You move your aerial. You're breaking up a bit there. 3-2.
My aerial's all right.
Where are you? 3-2.
3-0.
Okay, the Adelphi for Sam.
Jesus.
4-1.
3-0.
4-1.
3-0.
Outside Marks and Spencer's. Outside Marks and Spencer's for Mrs. Davis.
How'd you get it? I can't get a bleeding job.
Wow, back then you had to fight for the jobs. It was fastest finger on the radio to get the jobs. But people look back, and I think through rose-tinted glasses, was it busy all the time?
No, it's just quiet, mate, just quiet. Just quiet, lad, just quiet. No. Phones aren't ringing, lad. Phones aren't ringing. No. Stand by. Stand by, clear board. Stand by, clear board.
I've got to do 50 quid today. No chance of that.
4-7. Stop moaning, Joe. Stop moaning. Where were you Saturday night, lad? Where were you Saturday night? Stop moaning, Joe. Just stop moaning, Joe.
50 quid. Got to do 50 quid.
8-5.
No chance of that today.
You going home? All right then. Thanks for your cover. See you tomorrow.
Might have to go home as well.
6-0. No, lad. It's just quiet.
Jesus.
7-4. Same answer to you, lad. Just quiet. The phones haven't gone off.
I've got to do 50 quid today.
The GPO haven't switched us off. Don't worry. It's just quiet.
I've got to do 50 quid. I'm going to do 50 quid today.
7-5. 7-7. 7-7. All right, mate.
But when it was busy, it was busy. But drivers started to do this, and this is the first indication of cross-border hiring starting to be talked about.
Hey, now we've got bookings on coming through the night.
I'm not staying out.
Coming through the night. Blow me in if you're staying out working tonight. Blow me in if you're staying out working tonight.
I'm not staying out tonight. No, I'm
6,
done.
7.
Got my money.
4-4.
I'm not blown in.
2-2. Is that it? So, is that was working tonight? got bookings on all
So,
night.
self-employed,
boys
do
and
what I want.
girls. Is that who's only working tonight?
I'm going on the ale.
100 cars on this circuit. That's who's
I'm
working.
going on the ale. Self-employed, do what I want.
Pathetic.
I don't care. I don't care. I'm self-employed.
Don't be surprised if things in the future change.
Bollocks.
Just saying.
Bollocks. Nothing will ever change in this job.
So drivers were doing the money and going home. Great, because getting a badge back then was not easy to do. You had to do a knowledge test. On my knowledge test, it was 40 routes and places of interest. Also, that was done in a classroom under classroom conditions, as well as your medical, as well as your DVLA checks, and it was CRB in them days. All of them had to come through, but the biggest thing of all was that knowledge test. If you didn't pass that, you never got a badge. And every base company had licenses for that area. So basically, I was Sefton, and my base company was in Sefton, and every driver on that base company was Sefton licensed. So for the base companies, they couldn't employ loads of drivers. It was very narrow. So every base company across the country was employing drivers from that local area. So private hire then was very localized. That was great for the driver, because sometimes it was really busy, sometimes the money was really good, but other times the public was suffering. And the public was suffering because certain times of the day, especially around school times, it was very difficult to get a cab, because most of the drivers were either on school contracts, or the drivers who I knew would start at 5 in the morning and finish at 2 in the afternoon and be on the golf course for the rest of the day. It was good times. It was. It was. I must admit, it was. But there were times when the job was slack as well. But the people who suffered most were the public, especially late at night in nightclub, after nightclubs, and nightclubs finished then at 2 a.m. You couldn't get a cab. You could not get a cab. That's why drivers would sit outside nightclubs with the set switched off, cherry picking jobs. That happened a lot. Cherry picking back in the day was massive, and I must admit I did it too, because you weren't getting we called it in the Northwest bogeys, but no-shows. So if you cherry picked, you never got a no-show. So everybody you picked up was there, and you were away with them. So that was easy, because there was a lot of no-shows, because people were waiting for cabs for ages and ages and ages, because licenses were limited. Now, private hire companies wanted to get rid of these limitations of where you could work, limitations, keeping everything small, and private hire companies was saying about, let's see whether we can lift these restrictions on who can be licensed on our systems, rather than having, in my case, all Sefton drivers on the same system. Let's go to court and let's see whether we can get drivers from neighbouring areas onto our system with their licenses. As long as you're licensed to a council and you've passed all your checks, why not? And then, as time went on, the knowledge tests started to become less and less, because we had sat-navs, and sat-nav again changed the job, and councils were starting to dumb down their processes to gain a private hire licenses, and more drivers came onto the system because the knowledge test was reduced and in some cases taken away. By 2008, the Great Recession of 2008, more and more drivers were coming onto private hire systems, because that tough knowledge test was being taken down and down and down. As the council was saying, there's no real need now for a driver to have a topographical, geographical knowledge of the local area, because all you got to do is switch on your sat-nav, and that takes you to where you want to be. So let's just make sure you pass a medical, you pass your DVLA checks, you do your DBS, CRB, DBS, and then you're good to go. That's what was happening. So more drivers were coming onto the market. In 2012, Uber appeared in the UK. Uber appeared from America. Doing ride-hailing in America was getting quite big. And in America, just needed a car. It was like ride sharing. So basically Uber was just ride sharing in America, came to the UK where we have more regulation in the UK, and they launched in London. And when they launched in London, they shook up the private hire industry altogether. The London black cab trade didn't know what hit them. The London private hire trade didn't know what hit them, because in London, private hire companies operated out of shop fronts, small systems all over the capital. There was a multitude of private hire companies all operating, and a lot of the time operating without licenses or badges. The drivers would stand round stations. I remember a sign in Victoria Coast Station in London which says, "Do not get into a private hire vehicle outside this station. The driver may not be insured." Because the London private hire trade then wasn't really regulated as it is now. The London black cabs were licensed by the Metropolitan Police. So TfL appeared. TfL came along, and then that really regulated the London taxi industry. But Uber had arrived, and Uber had changed the London taxi trade completely. The black cabs now had a major challenge to their livelihoods. Uber appeared, and people in the capital were getting taxi rides cheaper, easier through an app. TfL were issuing licenses without having to go through the 3 to 4 year knowledge process, which a black cab driver has to do. The knowledge test is still alive today. And some people would say, good that it's still alive today, because London black cab drivers do have extremely good knowledge of the streets of London. The Uber drivers just rely on the sat-nav. But 40,000 Uber drivers joined the platform, and London taxi trade was changed forever. Across the UK, Uber was saying, let's get rid of these borders and boundaries. 2015, Uber really did take off, and we came to the Deregulation Act, which said that all you needed to work as a private hire driver was your private hire license and your badge to one council. And private hire base companies were saying, yeah, as long as you're licensed to a council, you can work. Come and join us. So Delta, my company, were taking on drivers from outside the area. So drivers were coming in with Knowsley licenses, Liverpool licenses, and Wirral licenses, and across the Merseyside area to join Delta, because Delta wanted to expand their fleet, and most private hire companies wanted more drivers, because more drivers meant better cover for the customers and, of course, more money for them. So Uber is expanding. Uber is now running across the UK, and when Uber first came into the UK, they're a tech company, not a private hire company. So they said, well, as long as the driver has got a badge and he's got his vehicle license to the same council, use our app and drive where you like. When Uber started in the UK and grew in the UK rapidly, I joined Uber, 2016? Was it around 2016, 2017? Basically, I could work anywhere in England. I couldn't believe it. For the having rode on Delta for 10 years in a very narrow margin area, working just Liverpool, Merseyside and nowhere else, suddenly I could switch my app on and I could work in Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, Nottingham, Derby. I could even go as far east as Essex. There was no restrictions. I could go up into the northeast and work up there as well. Uber said, as long as you're licensed, you can work anywhere. And Uber was growing rapidly at this point. But the councils then got a bit twitchy, because one day I worked in Essex one day. I worked in Essex all day on my Sefton private hire license. But local council was saying, hang on a minute, there's drivers here. A Sefton driver worked in Brighton. Suddenly we were working all over the place. But council said, this is not right. This is a bit too much. So Uber then regionalised their working areas. They brought it in a little bit, not a lot, but in a little bit. Cross-border hiring. is now in full effect. And 2015, that's when it really took hold. That's when it really took hold. But has it been good? Well, one council has really, really exploited this. Wolverhampton City Council, please stand up, because you now have more private hire licensed taxi drivers than anywhere else in the UK. Wolverhampton licenses account for 95%. 95% of licenses issued in Wolverhampton. The drivers do not live anywhere near Wolverhampton. Only 5% of Wolverhampton licensed drivers work in Wolverhampton, because Wolverhampton don't have a knowledge test. All they do, they have a customer service test, which is now like the VRQ, MVQ. It's just customer service. The knowledge test now doesn't exist. So that has brought an influx of private hire drivers onto the circuit. And now base companies employ Wolverhampton drivers in places like Nottingham, Derby, Sheffield, anywhere, Leeds, anywhere in the country, Manchester, Liverpool, anywhere you look except London, because London is still very much TfL controlled. But anywhere across the country now, Wolverhampton drivers operate on Uber and operate on your local private hire company. So you can be in Manchester and getting picked up by a Wolverhampton licensed driver. That's what happens now. The market has been opened up and saturated. So cross-border hiring has been good for the customer, because you get a cab now like that. Good for the driver in a way, because you can work a much bigger area. You can work everywhere now, really. But hasn't made the job better. Well, getting a license is easier than what it's ever been. But is that a good thing? Having no knowledge test, is that a good thing? Because a couple of weeks ago, I was in a different city working, and there was a road closure in front of me, and I didn't know how to get around this road closure. Now and my passenger had local knowledge, so it took me round the back streets to get away from the road closure. That's why local knowledge is good. And in my opinion, a knowledge test should not be taken away, because sat-navs are good, but if you get road closures and the sat-nav can't relocate quick enough, or it doesn't relocate at all, or it doesn't recognize the road closure, then that is where you fall down on Uber. Most, in fact, all Uber drivers, when they're not in their own city, rely on sat-nav, and that is not good. So cross-border hiring in some ways is good, but in other ways is bad. And the influx of Wolverhampton drivers, in my opinion, has now slowed down the work. I think now the trade is at saturation point. I think now the job is becoming harder than ever, because back in the day there was quiet times. Yeah, of course there was, but also there was very, very, very busy times, and taxis at certain times of the day were at a premium, but not anymore. You can get a cab now like that within minutes, 24 hours a day. Again, good for the customer, but is it really good for the driver? Also, the taxi rates are getting held down, are getting kept down, because there is just so many drivers. So they don't have to the Uber doesn't have to inflate the prices, because they have got so many drivers. Uber will not increase the prices. They don't need to, because they are flooded with drivers. If drivers left the trade, if thousands and thousands of drivers walked away from the job tomorrow, the rates would shoot up. The rates would go up really high, because they're struggling to get drivers. The early days of Uber, the rates were higher, and Uber gave you bonuses because they wanted drivers on the platform. Now they've got the platforms full. It's so heavy with drivers now. Uber just sit back and go, yeah, that's it, like it or lump it, that's the way it is. So too many drivers, cross-border hiring has made the trade flood. But will we ever go back? Can we ever go back? No, it's impossible. Now, Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester, wants out of town drivers out of Manchester. It can't happen because Andy Burnham maybe doesn't realise that the majority of them Wolverhampton drivers who live in Manchester all live in Manchester. The self-employed drivers in Manchester all live in Manchester. So what can we do about it? Well, we can limit driver numbers, but a council's going to stop taking on drivers. For the councils, especially Wolverhampton, it's a cash cow. But what can happen? We're going to keep cross-border hiring. That's a given. That will never go. But what we can do is take taxi licensing away from local councils and put it to a national taxi licensing authority. So every licensed driver has to operate to exactly the same standard. Your vehicle has to be to a standard. It can't be a 20-year-old vehicle running around. It has to be within a certain year and a certain condition. So if everyone's license was to a level, and bring back a knowledge test to a point, not an in-depth knowledge test, but just a geographical test of certain parts of the UK. Just make it a wider, because we wear cross-border, so make it a wider UK knowledge test, but not to a small area, to a larger area. Make getting a badge not as easy, because when you have an easy way to get a badge, the standard of driver does tend to drop. So with a national licensed taxi agency, which badges every private hire driver across England, and then there could be one for Wales, one for Scotland, maybe England, white badge, Wales, red badge, Scotland, blue badge, Ireland, green badge. So keep it to a national standard, because the localized areas have gone, because moving forward, more local private hire companies are going to go on apps, and then we're going to just basically, like, the bases, the offices, the phones, they're all going to go, and you're all going to be just on an app. So the borders, the boundaries ain't coming back ever. But let's raise the standards, and if it's a national licensed taxi agency, then they can cap when it's flooded, they can cap it. So more can't join, because as you see, and if you drive around, you will see Wolverhampton, the yellow Wolverhampton licenses everywhere. And it's only because Wolverhampton has made it so easy to get a license. Cross-border hiring, good or bad. Some parts are good, other parts are bad. My opinion is work wherever you like. No problem with that at all. But just when there's too many licenses being issued, just cap them, because at the minute, supply way outstrips demand. That's it from this one. Have yourself a great rest of your day. Videos coming up next week. How I drive to survive on Uber. In these hard times, it's a full week, warts and all. It's 5 days condensed into one video. So a lot of people watch my videos, my shift videos, and think, yeah, that looks like a good job. That looks all right. But this video will give you the warts and all, absolute warts and all. It starts from my house to when I start the shift to when I finish the shift. And you'll see what I go through in the course of my working day. You'll see all the frustrations which you go through in the course of your working day. It is warts and all, and it's out next week. Don't miss that one. Thank you if you subscribe to the channel. We got more subscribers now. Don't forget, as always, give the video a thumbs up, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye for now.